As you guys know, the third edition of the Horus Heresy is in full swing, and I've been making a bunch of videos on it. I've been playing the game, working on my own army, and very much enjoying it. Just a week or so ago, I did a video on the Deimos Pattern Predator tank and showed you guys how to get that painted up in the beautiful Imperial Fist color scheme, and it is a very cool tank. Everyone seemed to really enjoy the video, but Games Workshop decided to supersize it. And that's what today's video is going to be about. The new plastic Legion Fellblade tank is going to be built and painted like this in today's video. And I'm very excited to show you how I took it from grey plastic to this beast in today's video. So without further ado, let's dive in, get it painted. Okay, and this is the beautiful new plastic Fellblade kit. Obviously, I have fully assembled it, minus the sponsons. They are on little handles to the left. And obviously the turret comes off for ease of painting, and of course to turn it in the direction of the enemy in games and make pew pew noises until their toys are gone. I sprayed the entire model jet black in preparation for painting, and I'm very excited to get this model painted up. Before I get into it though, I just want to talk very quickly about supporting the channel. Thank you very much for continuing to watch the videos and all that kind of jazz. If you are enjoying the content, please do make sure you give the videos likes. If you do have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed. They cost you nothing to do those three things, but they're super important for us. And if you want to help support the channel even further, there is of course links to our Discord and becoming a YouTube channel member down below. You get access to a bunch of benefits like a private Discord server. You hang out with me on a daily basis and talk about your hobby, and also take part in all the different events that we host over there, painting competitions and monthly showcases and the like. Obviously, if you are buying lots of war dollies and you want to save yourself some money, we have some affiliate links down below as well. You can save yourself like 15-20% on your purchases, and the channel gets a little bit of a kickback as well. So you can check out those links below. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going for the stippling method for painting these tanks. This is the same method that I've been using for all of my Heresy tanks so far. It has a very long, prolonged, ugly stage. I'm not sure if you've heard me talk about the ugly stage before, but that's basically the bit where as you're painting a miniature, it's kind of looking worse and worse and worse before it starts to look better and then start looking good at the end. So it is definitely a technique you have to stick with, and you really do have to trust the process. So as you'll see, I started with Dryad Bark, and I stippled across the entire tank with all the armor panels that needed to be yellow with Dryad Bark to get a nice kind of a warm brown tone before I started working into yellow. You don't want to go from black to yellow. That turns it green a little bit. It's a weird thing. So having that brown tone in between really does help. And then the idea is we're going to be stippling through an entire host of colors. And basically we're going to be leaving less and less paint behind with each time, less and less pressure. Going to build up that yellow tone, but it's also going to have this kind of like very kind of multi-layered hue of yellow the whole way through. So I think it looks a lot more realistic to a military tank than, let's say, like, you know, one solid coat of yellow. And then I think it just looks like a toy you buy in Toys R Us or something. Not that Toys R Us is around anymore. I think it looks great. And as you will see, we will work through the colors and you will see how it works. So obviously we just finished with the base coat yellow, and now we're going on to the Uriel yellow. And you can see as it goes on, the color starts to look a little bit more solid, but obviously the more you look at it, the more, like I said, you can see those different hues. And yellow, as its kind of own thing, tends to be quite a difficult color and a difficult tone to paint. At least I personally think so. So I think a technique like this for some of your larger scale miniatures, especially if you're someone who doesn't have access to an airbrush, I think is a really cool technique. I've got a bunch of videos on my channel on me using this technique. I used it for my Cadian tanks. I also use it for all my Sons of Horus tanks for the rest of the Heresy playlist. So it's definitely a technique that I'm very comfortable with, and something that I think a lot more people should use. I'm using the Artist Opus dry brushes for this stippling technique. I learned most of this from some of Byron's videos doing his Star Wars Legion scenery. Mainly I use these kind of rounded dry brushes for stippling more than dry brushing. I find they do a really good job at that. The reason I use the Artist Opus ones specifically over, say, like the cheaper ones, like Army Painter ones, is the bristles on this one are a little bit stiffer, which means they're kind of a little bit better off for that stippling technique. And the softer ones will kind of splay out a little bit more and leave some kind of ugly lines behind when you're doing it. So yeah, that's just me. So as you can see, the yellow is definitely starting to take shape, but obviously we are hitting tracks and we're hitting panels that aren't supposed to be yellow and stuff, and it's kind of ruining the aesthetic a little bit. So there is a really nice stage in a little bit where we we go in with black paint and tidy up everything that isn't yellow, and that's when it really starts to kind of pop and look really nice. Flash gets yellow is now broken out, and as you can see if you pay attention to my hands, I'm going lighter, I'm moving slower, I'm being a little bit more kind of choosy as to the position of the flash gets yellow. I'm building up that tone. And as you can see, the yellow is starting to turn into a really nice color, but not super flat. Seeing the close-up on the turret, you can see it as well being applied. And once again, like I said, pay attention to that speed. Slower, more precise, not trying to leave behind huge splodges of like the brighter and brighter yellow. We're just trying to build up that tone. And this is basically all the stippling done for the yellow on the tank. We're going to do 2 more quick steps on the yellow to make it pop. I've introduced these new steps because I've changed how I'm painting my Imperial Fist infantry. And these colors are included in that. So by adding these 2 kind of stages in, it helps make the tank blend in with the infantry a little bit better. Makes it look a little bit nicer. But I am quite happy with how the yellow is turning out so far. So the first thing is going to be a light, kind of like a glaze coat of Imperial Fists yellow. This is going to help tie those tones together a little bit better, make the color pop, have a little bit more warmth to it, which I think suits the Imperial Fist aesthetic a little bit more. You can see that it's already having kind of like a drastic change in tone, but obviously because the Imperial Fist contrast is translucent, you can see through all the different tones already, and it's looking really cool. If you are curious, I have done a bunch of videos on Imperial Fist infantry for 3rd edition as well. If you want to go check those out, they're also in the Horus Heresy playlist on my channel. That playlist is very much full of videos, including a video on every single legion. There's so much of Primarchs done in there and stuff like that. So you can see that the yellow has gotten a lot warmer there. It looks really nice. The last step we're going to do is a very light dry brush of Wraithbone across the entire thing. This is just to catch the very kind of sharp edges, like the bolts, like door hatches and hinges, and like any other kind of sharp details will help define the armor plates a little bit more. And like I said, we do an edge highlight of Wraithbone on the infantry, so it just helps the tank blend in with the infantry, which I think is super important. Okay, now we're moving on to that very satisfying stage I was talking about before. We are going to start with Doom Death Black. We'll show a conversion chart for, like, there is a conversion chart for all the different colors. If I use some Too Thin Coats paint, of course there is a Games Workshop alternative one. I just like the triad for the black tones from Too Thin Coats, and I'm using that on some of the armor panels on my tanks. And we'll be using the same stippling technique to help make it kind of pop and blend in with the yellow as well, so it's not just like a totally flat black with this really built up yellow, and them next to each other looks a little bit weird. So we will be fixing that. And as you can see, the Doom Death Black has beautiful coverage. It also dries matte, which I think is super important. You don't want like the yellow paint looking kind of matte and then the black paint looking kind of satin or glossy. I don't think that's going to work next to each other at all. But you can see as I go around and tidy up the areas, it's making the yellow look even better, nice and neat and tidy, and like, you know what I mean? Your eyes kind of unfortunately naturally kind of geared towards looking at faults and looking for faults. So when you kind of tidy up the messy bits, the yellow I think pops and looks even nicer. As evidenced by this, with all the black tidied up, I do think the yellow looks really cool. I'd love to know at this point in the video what people think of the yellow technique, what I think of the yellow that we've achieved with the stippling. Obviously, it was super quick to do. I'd say all the stippling for the entire tank took less than an hour. So you're talking about doing the lion's share of painting a Fellblade for your Legion army in less than an hour, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, working up the blacks, we're going to go into Death Reaper, and just like before, we're going to be doing that stippling technique. Obviously, we've jumped to a much smaller sized brush. There's no way we could get this big one in between these panels and not just, you know, hit all the edges of the yellow with it. So please do take your time, smaller brush, and get those stippling work done. The mid-tone of the blacks, the one I'm currently doing, it doesn't really stand out a massive amount on camera, but it is making a difference. I do promise you there, it is doing something. But we will jump up to Dungeon Stone Grey, which is the final one, and obviously that makes quite a big difference. And as you can see, once again, pay attention to the kind of wrist action, the movement. I'm moving very slowly. Each stab is very deliberate, and I'm trying to leave behind these kind of like the exact amount of paint that I want to leave behind to layer up those kind of black tones. I think this is a pretty useful shot for seeing the grey left behind and seeing how I'm doing it, how I'm applying it. And you can see that it's not going to scream out at you with this thing, but it definitely helps blend the yellow and the black together and look a little bit more natural. Okay, with the yellow and black parts done, is of course time to start working on some of the metallics. So for this, we are going to reach for the trusty, always trustworthy lead belcher. And we are going to, of course, once again, grab Another dry brush. This time I'm going to be grabbing the traditional large flat dry brush. And like I said, when I'm dry brushing, I tend to grab the flat ones a lot more. I feel like I'm better suited with them. I've got more control with them. I have a lot of more practice with them. So for instance, when I'm doing tracks, I used to paint tracks like a solid coat of silver, then wash them and then dry brush them. But there was so much silver on the tank, it just detracted from all the other colors. Now all I do is I just black in the tracks entirely and give them a light dry brush of silver. I think it makes them look really natural. I think it looks really cool. We will be adding some weathering pigments later on to help blend them in a little bit more as well. But like I said, it doesn't scream and pull the attention away from the yellow, especially on an army like Imperial Fists where yellow is so predominant. It's such a grab your attention type of color. You don't want anything else trying to kind of steal that attention away. It'll kind of confuse your eyes. Now, one of my absolute favorite things in the world, and the wish if I could turn everyone's heads around and make them think differently about them, it is transfers. I'm going to cover this tank in transfers because I think the transfers are amazing. I think if you learn how to apply them properly, I've done a bunch of videos on how to apply them properly. This will not be the only sheet that I'll be pulling transfers from. I will be kind of grabbing a whole bunch of different ones from a bunch of different places, getting them cut out and getting them assembled. All in all, I ended up using 18 transfers on this tank. And this is the result, as you can see here. And I think it looks really cool. This one's my favorite one. The Wrath of Terra is what I've named the tank. And I've gone for an Imperial Fist, a Black Templar, and the Rand symbol around the cupola, which indicates that this tank has served alongside those different companies and is allowed to wear their badge of honor forevermore. At least that's the story that I've told myself in my head. I've got a little like unification badge on one of the turrets with like a load of writing underneath it. Maybe this was the original creed of the Unification Wars. This is how old this particular war machine is. And it is, of course, allowed to carry that badge into war as well. And now it is, of course, serving in the defense of Terra and continuing on its awesome journey. So transfers for me, always amazing. Okay, now there's about 9 million lights and little windows and stuff like that across this tank, and it's now time to paint them. So step one is making sure that they are all jet black. So I'm going in very carefully around the little windows around both hatches, and then trying to find all the little lenses that exist everywhere. There's a bunch built into the front of the turret. There's a bunch built into the front of the tank. The sponson weapons have little lights and stuff and sensors for aiming and stuff like that. So make sure you do that. And then I'm going through the 3 colors of red: Mephiston red, Evil Sun Scarlet, and Wild Rider red. I'm basically doing that highlight, which will go down the right hand side and sweep across the bottom. And then it'll just be the same thing with each coat, just getting smaller and smaller and kind of sharper into the corner. And then finally, we'll finish it with a dot of white in the opposite corner. So the top left corner, we'll just add a dot of white in and throw that across all those different lenses. And then a very quick coat of hard coat when all those paints are dried will kind of give those lenses that shiny appeal, make all those colors pop. And it makes a whole bunch of the details across the tank look really finished, and it looks really good. I've often in the past left these kind of details black, and it's just, obviously the tank looks a little bit dull. I think adding things like transfers, working on things like lights, adding a few weathering pigments. The difference between having a really bland and really boring tank and having something that looks like it belongs in a war zone and looks really cool. So I do often add these details to my tanks or any other kind of large scale miniatures. They take a tiny bit of extra time, but I just love it. So here's the tank with all the lenses and stuff all done. You can see those pops of color all around the tank. I have in the background also been painting up the sponsons using exactly the same technique. The black areas were all done the same as the black areas. A small brush and some lead belcher was used for the metallic parts. And then like the lights and lenses and stuff like that exist along the side will also have been applied as well. So it just, I really dislike painting sponsons for tanks. I don't know what it is. It's just a little, like a mental block. So yeah, it didn't bother showing it on camera. Like I said, the Wrath of Terra, it's such a cool, I think it's really cool around the cupola, seeing those 3 designs and its name stamped there, showing its kind of provenance and its heritage. And with the sponsons in place, like I said, I did do them, of course. Now, this is where you could naturally stop. If you're not a big fan of weathering, this is your finished Legion Fellblade. You could obviously put this on a table and start rolling some dice in anger immediately. And I think it looks really good and looks really cool. But I am a big fan of, like I said, the weathering powder. My army is based late siege, not late heresy, late siege. It is the Imperial Fists defending Terra for a year. The amount of ash and dust and debris and explosions that are happening constantly kind of around the battlefield. The amount of stuff that's going to be landing on top of these tanks. There's no way it's going to look clean or pristine or new or anything like that. So that's why I'm going to come in with my trusty tray of just horrible pigment. Pigments are a super messy thing to play around with. So as you can see, I have applied gloves, and I have this particular tray which just gets put right up in the corner of my room. I only take it down when I'm applying stuff. And I've got these brushes that I don't try and clean them off. I don't want to start mixing pigment in with water or anything like that. So I just have these specific brushes set aside for doing that. And then I choose what pigments I want to use, a bit of black, a bit of red, depending if I want like engine vents or whether it's just the debris and stuff from Terra, like fitting it into seams and stuff around edges, on ledges. And then obviously you blow off the excess so it's not like a crazy amount left behind. And then when you have your pigment in like all of those finalized places, you have blown off all the excess that you don't want, including covering the tracks in it, because obviously it's been trundling through all this dirt and debris as well. You just hit the entire tank then with a nice satin or matte varnish. I use the Mediocre varnish from Games Workshop. This is a bunch of different uses. Obviously, it's going to protect the paint. It's going to secure all the transfers on fully, make sure that they're blended into the tank. It's also going to make all the weathering powder stick to the tank fully. It also makes sure that the weathering powder kind of dulls down a little bit, so it's not like screaming attention at you. And with that applied, we have our finished Legion Fellblade. I'd also like to know if people are in favor or they would not add in the weathering powder at the end. Do you think it's too much? Do you think it's too little? Do you like it more when it's pristine and yellow? It won't change what I do in the future. I really like the aesthetic of it, but I'm just curious to see how many people are like-minded like me, or how many people think that they should leave it off. I'm super pleased to have the full Fellblade painted and ready for games. I am very much enjoying games of the Horus Heresy. I'm just going to have to start playing slightly larger games if I want to include such behemoths as this. And yeah, hopefully you guys are interested in picking up a Fellblade for yourself, and it's going to arrive all over Instagram in awesome colors and stuff like that. And I can't wait to see them. So thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end of this video. I'll see you in the next one.